السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوكل عليه. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما. آمين يا رب العالمين. Ahlan wa sahlan marhaba. I welcome you all to lesson 4 of Tajweed. Inshallah, in today's lesson, we will consolidate all Makhārij, we'll go over all of them, and then we will see how to implement them, practice them, and then how to implement them in our recitation. Before that, let's quickly go over what we studied in the last class. We studied that there are 5 major Makhārij of al-lisan: Aqsal lisan, Wasatul lisan, Ra'sal lisan, and Taraful lisan. And Hafatul lisan was the edge of the tongue. So this is the tip of the tongue. Taraful lisan. Ra'sul lisan was the head of the tongue where Ra was coming out from. Wasatul lisan was the middle of the tongue where Jim, Sheen, Ya were coming from. And Aqsal lisan was for Qaf and Kaf. And Dad was coming out from the previous edge of the tongue. And the front edge of the tongue was for Lam. And Taraful lisan has a couple of letters. There are 4 Makhārij. For Noon, we touch the tip of the tongue on the palate, which is very close to the front incisors, but it's still the palate, not the gums of the teeth. But for To, Dal, Ta, we move the tongue a little bit forward. It touches there where there is gum line of the front top incisors, and that's where To, Dal, and Ta come from. And Ta, Dal, Ta, we take the tongue a little bit forward. So Noon, from Noon, we moved a little bit forward for To, Dal, Ta, and then we moved a little bit forward and we kind of stick it out and touch the edges of the front incisors, Tha, Dal, and Sa, Lo, Tha, Dal, and Lo, and then we go and take the tongue down below and touch the lower incisors, or kind of bring very close to them, even if you're not pressing it on them, and create a tight passage for the whistling sound for Sod, Za, and Sin. So these were the Makhārij of the tip of the tongue. Let's go ahead and review all the Makhārij. I found this image a long time ago on the web. It's not mine. I didn't create it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward the person immensely who created and bless them with goodness of dunya and akhirah. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. It is very helpful because in the beginning it's very overwhelming learning all these Makhārij and trying to remember them. So this image is very helpful for a general review of remembering, what comes from where. So let's go over all the Makhārij that we have studied up until now. And then inshallah, we will practice them. So we know that we divided the major areas of throat, lips, tongue, and nose. And throat is where the 6 letters come from. There are 3 Makhārij in throat, and one is the top throat, where is Ghain and Kha coming from, and then Ain and Ha from the middle of the throat, and the lower, which is the kind of deeper part of the throat, is Aqsal Halq, is Ha and Hamza. So we're supposed to remember that when you're saying Ha, it's not sounding like Ha. It depends which part of the muscles of the throat you use. The sound will differentiate. So Ha and Ain comes from the middle of the throat, and Ha and Hamza comes from the deeper parts. And when we're saying Ha and Ha, we practice together to differentiate. And Hamza, we need to remember that Hamza and Ain sound should be separated from each other, and also they should not sound like Aliful Madiyah. And sorry, I didn't mention Jawf as well. So the first Makhraj was for Jawf that we did. It was from the hollow, the area that is from the mouth and throat, and the letters of it were Alif, Waw, Ya, Madiyah. And Madiyah letters are actually long vowels that are elongation of Fatha, Dhamma, and Kasra. So Alif preceded by a Fatha, Ya preceded by a Kasra, and Waw preceded by a Dhamma. So Jawf was for these 3 letters, and then the 6 letters were coming from the throat. And then we did lips. Let's leave tongue for the end, that we did the way we did it earlier. So the lips were for four letters, where the edges of the top incisor touch the inner part of the lip, and fa comes out from. See how they put fa there, kind of in this place. And then waw is by rounding the lips, and then mim and ba, they both come from touching the lips. And the soft closing and the hard closing. So you can see all these letters are right here, and when you look at it, you know, okay, yeah, these are the letters of lips. Ashafadan. Then we are left with khayshum and al-lisan. Khayshum was the nasal cavity. It was the hollowness inside the nose where the sound of noon and meme runs from. It's not the makhraj of noon and meme. I just want to remind you all, it is for the characteristic of gunna, because when the makhraj for noon and meme closes, the sound goes through the nose and gives this gunna sound into them, and we are able to pronounce noon and meme properly without using the nasal cavity. The noon and meme cannot be pronounced. So the makhraj for gunna is al-khayshum, the nose, the nasal cavity. Now we're left with the tongue, and we have already reviewed these letters earlier, but see how they have placed it in the deeper part of the tongue, qaf and kaf. So the makhraj is a little bit forward for kaf because, you know, it touches up on the hard palate, and qaf, it touches a soft palate. For jim, shin, ya, the middle of the tongue, and it touches whatever lies on the top of the middle of the tongue. You don't have to find a specific spot for that, but just raise your tongue and touch it with the roof of the mouth. What you need to remember is that for these letters especially, don't clench your teeth. That's a habit that people have, saying is jim with the clenched teeth, and that makes the jim sound wrong. You're supposed to use the middle of the tongue, say j, and then inshallah we'll practice over that. So these three letters from the middle, and then the tip has the letter lam, noon, and ra. How they have placed ra here, because it comes from the head of the tongue, right? So but first it comes ra because it comes from the head of the tongue, then noon a little forward, tip of the tongue goes and touches this part. And then we move forward for ta, dal, ta, then we move a little bit forward for la, tha, da, and we move down for za, sin, and sad. So we did la, tha, and da from the tip of the tongue touching the edges, and then we brought the tip down below in the lower incisor and pronounced za, sin, and sad. For the edge of the tongue, back part of the tongue, back edges press against the molars and first premolar and all molars, and we pronounce the sound of lot, not from the tip. All the tip goes up, but the pressure is only placed from the back edges. For lam, however, we only use the front edge, and we place it in the front incisor from the first molar to the other molar, so it's a whole round thing around the mouth, and we say l, l. So here we are, we have reviewed all the makhārij that we have done, alhamdulillah. So if you forget the details and you want to know, then you can inshallah go back and review, but this picture is very good for a reference, quick reference for you to remember which letter was where. So you can practice properly, and it is recommended that you practice your makhārij at least, you know, daily. If you cannot do that, then often. Do it often, you know, maybe put a schedule, do it every other day, or do it once a week. It's very important that we practice our makhārij. So let's go over the letters of al-jawf and practice them. Alif al-madiyya, you can see I have attached alif al-madiyya with different letters to practice. Ta. When we're saying ta, we're supposed to, when we're saying ta without alif, we'll say ta. But when we see an alif after it, we'll say this fatha in 2 counts. Ta, ma, a. And if we shorten that sound, it will change the sound of the word. Let's practice qala. If you say qala, then you're skipping this alif al-madiyya, and it is changing the word. You should say qala. Make sure that you pay attention to alif al-madiyya wherever you see it in Quran, and you pull it 2 counts. Qala. Instead of saying qala, say qala. And for waw al-madiyya, we also elongate 2 counts, tu. So without waw, it would be tu, but with waw, it will be tu, mu, u. So we are just elongating the sound to 2 counts for a timing of a letter. Al-muflihun, al-muflihun. So if I do not pronounce this waw, it will hun. It will kind of sound like hun. It should be hun. will elongate 2 counts. And this is a kind of mad as well here. So there's an allowance of pulling it 4 counts and 6 counts. Inshallah, when we do madud, we will talk about it. Ya Madiya will again pull it 2 counts. Ti, mi, e. Without ya, it would be ti, mi, e. But with ya, it should be ti, mi, e, alim. Again, this is also a mad, but 2 counts is must, mandatory that we pull it. Alim, alim, not azim, because the ya is there and we have to pull it 2 counts. This kasra should be pulled 2 counts. Alim. Al-halq. So the letters from the deeper throat are hamza and ha, and we placed a hamza on the top of it and practice for the sake of practice. So make sure that you bounce your hamza, because if you don't, then your hamza will not be heard. When hamza has sukoon on it, it is one of those letters that bounce. We don't put it in the calcula letters though, but it should be bouncing. Otherwise, your hamza sound will disappear because it has short timing in it. And when we study sifat, you will know what I mean by short timing letter. And yu'minun. So when hamza has sakin on it, we are supposed to give a little, jerk there. Yu'minun. You cannot say yu'minun. Then you will only be reading this waw as a waw, not hamza. And it's not a waw, it's a hamza because there's a hamza there. So we'll say yu'minun, not yu'minun, not yu'minun, yu'minun. And when hamza is mutaharrik, there is no need to create that jerk sound. A, I, O. A, I, O. But it has to be strong. It cannot be, your hamza should not sound like alif. Because there are rules in different recitations of Quran that hamza is read with the softer sound, hamza musahala, and that sound is kind of sometimes in the middle of an alif and a hamza. So you have to make your hamza softer, but otherwise hamza should be strong. U, I, A, coming from the deeper part of the throat, because it's not going to come from the jawf or from the middle, it's going to come from the deeper part of the throat. For ha, fihi. Sometimes when we stop on this ha, it disappears. We have to say fi. Make sure that you create this sound when we stop on this ha, so that your ha is heard. Fi, ha, he, hu. Ha, he, hu. It should be strong. It should be coming from the deeper throat, not from the middle part of the throat. If it's coming kind of in a general same place your other ha comes from, then the listener will not be able to differentiate. So you need to make sure that your ha and your ha sound different. Ain sakin, an'amta. So ain should have fatha with a. If there is a fatha on ain, then we say a. A, E, O. And if we practice the sound with fatha dhamma kasra, it will help our muscles to be stronger and used to of saying ain with all these harakas. O, E, A. This ha sakin. Alhamdu. Ha, he, hu. Ha, he, hu. See how it's different from your ha, he, hu. Ha, he, hu. Oh. Ghain comes from the very close part of the throat, which is next to mouth, where the mouth starts from. Oh. Ghayril maghdubi. Ghayril. And ghain is heavy, so we'll say gha. Ghayril maghdubi. So when ghain has sakin, make sure you don't go fast on it, otherwise your ghain will not be heard. Maghdubi. Give ghain its time. It has longer time when it has sukun on it. Gha, ghi, wu. Gha, ghi, wu. For kha, don't over exaggerate your kha. Don't make it sound like you're gargling. Yes, you should practice it with an exaggeration, but when you are saying it, make sure it's not sounding over exaggerated, and it should not be done for any of the letters though. خالدين خالدين خا خي خو. And your kha should sound different from your ghain. You should practice in a way that it's very clearly distinguished. And the only way to do it by practicing the Makhārij. Kha, khi, hu. Let's move on to the next slide. Ash-shafatan, letters af. Make sure you let this flow happen for fa. It's part of fa. Af. Fawqaha. Your fa will sound like wow if you don't let this flow happen of your sound and your the wind that's coming from the mouth. Af. Fawqaha. Fa fi fu. Fa fi fu. Ow. Ow. Wow. Fasawahun. Ow. So you make sure that you round your lips. If you don't round your lips, the sound of wow will not be prominent. Fasawahun. Wa, we, woo. Wa, we, woo. Mutashabiha, mu. Mutashabiha. We're rounding the lips only for dhamma here. Mu. Ma, mi, mu. Simply we're touching our lips gently and we're saying ma, mi, mu. Ab. Ba bounces, it is a kalkala letter. We'll inshallah do it in sifat, how to do that. Ab. For now, remember to bounce quickly, open the lips so that the sound of ba can flow. If you do not open your mouth, the sound of ba will not flow. You can practice it ab. See, it's half sound. Unless you open your mouth, ab. When ba has sukoon, only then it bounces. Otherwise, it does not bounce. Fataba, ba, bi, bu. Fataba, ba, bi, bu. Let's practice gunna for al-khayshum because there is no specific makhraj in the nose. Rather, it is a gunna sound for specifically connected with noon and meme. And whenever in different scenarios it comes, we talked about in detail how there are different gunnas in Quran. And inshallah, when we study in detail, then we'll talk about different types of gunna. Min ba'd, yunfiquna. You'll say yunfiquna. And it's because it's ikhfa, and we'll inshallah talk about it in detail what's ikhfa. Yunfiquna, like ink. We don't touch the tongue on the palate. We'll say ink, like it's going closer but not touching. Similarly, yunfiquna shay'an wala, shay'an wala. So the sound is constantly going through the nose. Shay'an wala. You'll feel your nose vibrating. Inni. So whenever you see noon mushaddad, here I will explain gunna a little bit. That tanween is followed by waw and it's merging there. So there is sound there. There is a gunna there. Shay'an wala. And we'll study these cases in detail where gunna happens, and inshallah you will know that where to do gunna, where not to do gunna. Inni. Remember for now that noon mushaddad and mim mushaddad, they'll always have gunna. Pull it 2 counts. Minkum laman. Minkum laman. So noon sakin and mim sakin both are here. I copied the example for mim, but we'll see noon there too. We see noon there. Alayhim bil ithm. Alayhim bil ithm. So mim sakin going through the nose here. Alayhim min. Here as well, mim is merging into mim. Alayhim min fa'amma. So this is for now. Remember that whatever noon mushaddad and mim mushaddad is, make sure you do gunna 2 counts, and then inshallah we'll study more detail of gunna characteristic. And even if when is noon and mim mutharik are there, you remember that it always nasalizes. Na, nu, ni. Your nose is involved there. You will feel the vibration in your nose. Ma, mi, mu. So remember that when you are practicing, inshallah. أقصى اللسان, the deepest part of the throat. The deepest part of the tongue. Al-qaf. For qaf, the letter that is heavy. So this is what differentiates qaf from kaf. One of the things that is heavy, and also it touches a softer palate. Yaqulu, yaqulu, ako, ko, ki, ku, ako, ko, ki, ku. Kaf. Al-kitabu, al-kitabu, ak, ka, ki, ku. So ko and ka, they should be different in sound. Ko, ka, kui, qui, ki, ku, ku. Ku, ki, and ka, and stretching the hard palate. Ku, qui, ko. Do not over-exaggerate your cough though when you're reading. And when these heavy letters have different haruka on them, their level of heaviness changes. So when we do this sifa, inshallah, we'll go over in detail. So your ku and your ka will be heavier than your ki. And make sure you say ki, you're not saying kui. You're not adding vowel there. So it should be kui, not kui. Kui, ka, ku. Wasatul lisan, the three letters, jim, sheen, and ya. Tijaratuhum, tijaratuhum, aj. As I mentioned, that some of calculators are there. Jim is also a calculator. When there is a sukun on jim, we bounce it. Otherwise, the sound will not be heard. Aj. And make sure you don't say your jim by clenching the teeth. Rather, the middle of the tongue should go and touch the roof of the mouth. Ja, ji, ju. Ja, ji, ju. Not ja, ji, ju. Ja, ji, ju. Shin, yash'urun. Yash'urun. Like, see how I mentioned that fa, you have to let the sound run. Similarly, sheen has the first in it, and it's a kind of sifa that's only for sheen. Yash'urun. Yash'urun. So when sheen has sakin, make sure that you give it its timing. Ash, sha, shi, shu. Ash, sha, shi, shu. So for ya madiyya, ghayr madiyya, remember the ya madiyya was that has a kasra before it. It does not have any harak on itself. But those of you who use Indopaki Musaf, you'll see a sukun on it. Remember that there is a ya, every ya sakin that has a kasra before it is ya madiyya, and it comes from the jawf. Every other ya that has any haruka or a fatha before it or dhamma before it, then it will, you might not see dhamma, but I'm just saying it for the sake of differentiating it from ya madiyya. So you have to say it from the makred, which is the middle of the tongue. Shayatinihim, shayatinihim, ay, ya, yi, you. So when you're saying shaya, shaya, make sure you're using the makhraj. Shayatinihim, ay, ya, yi, you. Hafatul lisan letters, dad and lam. Ad-dalala, ad-da, ri, ru. Make sure your dad sakin does not bounce. It should not be ad. It should be ad. Remember, we talked about that, how you put the tongue and you move it forward. Don't let it depart the makhraj. It will not bounce then. Only if your tongue leaves the makhraj before the sound has run for a log, then it will bounce. It should not bounce. Ad-da, ri, ru. Lam, bil huda, bil, and some people say bil huda. Lam also does not bounce. When it has sukun, you just hold the makhraj. And for lam as well, we move the tongue a little. We slide the tongue on the makhraj a little so that it does not bounce. Bil huda, al, la, li, lu. La, li, lu. Al, bil huda, not bil huda. Bil huda. Ra, from Ra's al-Lisan. Tijaratuhum, tijaratuhum, ar, ra, ri, ru. Don't say ar, too much. Say ar, that's it. ra, ri, ru. There's a natural takrar in it, but you're supposed to not over exaggerate it. Ar, ra, ri, ru. And if you remember, this was the head of the tongue, where it was coming from, very close to the tip. Nun, unzila, an, na, ni, nu. Unzila, an. I'm making it clear here, but I said zila because this is a kind of a gunna where we do not see the sound of nun clearly. But here, nun sakin, we can say an, depending on what comes after it. It will become clear sound of nun. An, na, ni, nu. I have placed ra here as well, but I'm going to skip it, inshallah, as we have already done the makhraj for it and practice. Ta, tughyanihim. Ato, to, tui, tu. To bounces. To sakin bounces, so you have to bounce it. It's heavy as well. Ato, to, tui, tu. Dal, da, ad. Dal also bounces. Ad, da, di, du. Da, di, du, ad. Istawqada, for ta. Istawqada. All these three letters have the same makhraj. At. Ta does not bounce. You cannot say at. You say at. You kind of hold and let the hums happen in the end of the sound of ta when it has sukun on it. At. So the sound can run without bouncing. Ta, ti, tu. And we'll study hums. It's a sifa. Inshallah, when we do sifat, we'll talk about it. Ta, ti, tu. Sad, wa absarihim, as, so, sui, su. Remember, it was a whistling letter. So, sui, su. Seen, bisam'ihim. If you notice, I said absarihim and sam, bisam'ihim. So is heavy. If you say absarihim, that will turn into a sin. So make sure that when you're saying sad, you're not saying it like sin. Bisam'ihim, as, sa, si, su. Sa, si, su. Azai, nazzalna, az, za, zi, zu. This is your letter that will have the strong sound. Za, zi, zu. As compared to your letter dal. Allah, azlama, azlama, Allah, ri, ru. So the tip of the tongue comes out and presses on the front edges, kind of comes in the middle of the edges of the up top and bottom incisors. And we say law. Because we're making it heavy too, you might have difficulty in touching the makhraj, but make sure that you're not letting it sound like za. You're not letting the whistling happen in Allah, li, lu. Your sound will be good even if your tongue is not reaching the makhraj yet. It will eventually when you practice it a lot. Adhal, la dhahaba. So you cannot say la zahaba because that's a sound of za, zai, not a dha, not a dhal. So the zai sound is nazzalna, the strong whistling sound, whereas dhal has la dhahaba because the tongue comes out and touches the teeth, the top of the teeth, and stops this whistling sound. The, lu. So if you notice, there's a difference between sharpness of the za and softness of the. You have to practice that, inshallah, then you will be able to differentiate the, lu. Ta, athamarat, tha, fi, fu. Tha, fi, fu. So you have to remember that your tha does not become ta or does not become sa. It's a middle sound of sin and ta, ti, su, tha, ti, su, not ta, ti, tu, or sa, si, su. So you have to differentiate, inshallah. When you practice, you will be able to achieve that, inshallah. So the best, it will not take that long for you to practice because we were going over the words as well. What's the mechanism of practicing is that you take every letter, you put sakin, hamza and sakin before it. So this part only, you think about a letter. So if you have that picture, you can just keep the picture in front of you and you start from the throat and you end at the tip of the tongue or wherever, however it's easy for you. And maybe you can end at lips, shafatan, whatever works for you, inshallah. And you do it with the sakin first, then mutaharrik, with the every haraka, fatha, dhamma, and kasra. Alhamdulillah, we have finished practicing them. Let's implement them in our recitation. A'udhu billahi. Make sure when you're saying a'udhu, you pull for ayn, you say ayn dhamma correctly, and you pull it for waw as well. A'udhu. Sometimes we're rushing and we don't pay attention, and some people probably never even thought about it. Say a'udhu. People say a'udhu, zu actually, a'udhu, a'udhu. It's not a'udhu, it's a'udhu. A'udhu billahi. And remember to pull for lam of ism jalala 2 counts. Billahi. And I know in the Paki text have a standing fatha here. You know how we in the Uthmanic Musaf we have standing alif, small alif. Similarly, they call it standing fatha in the Paki Musaf, and they know the standing fatha is pulled 2 counts. So even if you don't see it in a text, make sure you pull it. Billahi. A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. Make sure you close your mouth for meme, otherwise, and give it its time. Otherwise, your meme will not be heard. Minash shaytanir rajim. Make sure you say to correctly and heavy, not the, not minash shaytanir rajim. It's minash shaytanir rajim. Let's go over Surah Al-Fatiha. So I have copied both kind of text, whatever you're comfortable with. You can follow along with that one, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So when you're saying Bismillah, make sure you give Seen Sakin its time. Millahi, lam will be light here for Isma Jalala. Sometimes it's heavy, and inshallah we'll go over the cases where lam is heavy. And it's not difficult to remember. It's very easy once, inshallah, you start implementing, where we'll say a lam of the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heavy. Here it is light because there's a kasra before it. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Remember, your ha sound should be different from your other ha, which is coming from the deeper throat and the middle of the throat. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu. When you say Iyyaka, make sure you hold the makred, the ya is mushaddad, and you will give a little bit longer timing. Iyyaka. And ya should come from the middle of the tongue. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. So here there is no haraka here, this is Hamzatul Wasl. But if you notice in the Paki Musaf, they have placed a haraka for you, and they have written it like a regular alif, whereas it's Hamzatul Wasl. As I mentioned earlier, that Hamza and alif, they were later differentiated. And for ease in the Paki Musaf, all the harakas are placed on Hamzatul Wasl. Whereas when you read from Uthmanic text, you have to remember what haraka to place. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. So remember that you're not saying صراط الذين, you should say صراط الذين أنعمت. So your the should be not za. أنعمت عليهم. Make sure you give ayn from its proper makhraj. غير المغضوب. From now onwards, whenever you're reciting however much you can recite daily, do it slowly and try to give every letter, every haraka its due time, inshallah. We can, inshallah, quickly go over Suratul Ikhlas and Falak and Nas as well before we, inshallah, finish. So that when you read these surahs, you are paying attention to all those small details. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad. So remember to bounce the dal second bounces. Ahad, don't say ahad and don't bounce it. And you say qul, not kul. Qul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. Sod heavy. It should not sound like sin. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. Remember to bounce dal. There's a lot of dal in this surah. Every ayah is ending with a dal, and there's another dal sakin. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. And some people say kufuwan. Remember to say kufuwan. There is dhamma on kaf, there is dhamma on fa. Say kufuwan ahad. And sometimes we have memorized it, and over time when we do not review it from the text, the mistakes creep in. So make sure, if you probably have memorized these surahs in a young age, so remember to review your hifz always by looking at it and listening to a recitation as well after some time, so that you can fix any mistakes that creep in after some time that we forget, and we don't pay attention to small details. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq. Cough also bounces. Heavy cough also bounces. The other cough does not bounce. Min sharri ma khalaq. وَمِن شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبَ وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ. Make sure you say naffathati. These alif madiyya are there. The small alif or alif madiyya. Naffathati. And it's not naffasati. Naffathati. Make sure you pull for alif madiyya, and also tha should be tha, not ta or sa. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ. Some people, when they make the sound of the softer, they just change it into dal. So you have to remember that it's not a dal, it's a the, not za or the. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, malikin nas, ilahin nas. It's not ilahin nas. There's alif mad there. Ilahin nas. And make sure you say your hamza clearly, strongly. Hamza is strong and alif is soft. من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. So if you notice, Noon Mushaddad, I have been holding two cams, and there were other places I was holding Noon Sakin. Even if you don't know that yet, but make sure you hold from now on every noon and mim mushaddad for two counts. Alhamdulillah, we practice. Make sure that you review your memorization for these surahs, and read them from looking and practicing, and try to follow and copy the recitation, my recitation or the reciter that you choose to practice with, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.